content over everything.
I mean, they imagine they would do better. It's illusion, but I mean, obviously they can argue. They can argue. They can argue. They would have campaigned for X, Y, and Z. I don't think that's true.
What's they talking about?
Votes would have been pretty much the same.
Oh, go and listen. You interview.
Well, that's speculative.
What for?
Just that it's a lot of people voted
What for?
because it was a Brexit election, really. It wasn't a normal election.
That's true. But I mean,
It
all
wasn't
right,
a straightforward election.
all right. Having said that, they could have entered that beforehand.
They could have. They should have.
It could have been shifted in a different direction
See, if
much
Corbyn-
earlier on.
If Corbyn had said, actually, we accept the
Are you
Brexit
set? Are
vote.
you just running? Are you?
I'm running, yeah.
Are you doing a live feed? Is it or what?
No,
you doing?
no, live.
Okay. Well, we've been discussing. I'll start slow. We've just been discussing the dynamics in the Labour Party. My own opinion is, if it were possible to persuade Jeremy Corbyn to remain leader of the Labour Party and to stand in an election, I think he would win a resounding majority, and it would also open up the debate. And if he doesn't stand, we still need to have a fundamental debate where the structure of the debate is reorganised in a different form to that which has been happening over the last few years. And so I will propose, and I will suggest that our friends from Content Over Everything participate in this, and that is that we have detailed interviews, just the same as the establishment are able to set the tone of discussions. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. In the general election, not only in the election, but also in the whole period since Jeremy Corbyn was first elected, who has had more airtime? Ask yourself this. Who has had more airtime? Laura Koonsberg or Jeremy Corbyn? Who gets more airtime? Andrew Neil or Jeremy Corbyn? Who gets more airtime? What's this guy? Andrew, what's the other guy? The pundit who they always get to interview, the guy who had a stroke before.
Oh, Andrew Marr.
Andrew Marr or Jeremy Corbyn. It's quite clear that in British society today, the news media dominate the discussion about political issues to such an extent that they have more influence or as much influence as a politician in shaping the debate. And so what I'm going to suggest is that we do long interviews, and I'm quite happy to do the interviews myself with all the candidates. If there's an election where Jeremy Corbyn is not present or where he's present, that we interview all the candidates from our perspective, from a grassroots, left-wing, socialist perspective. And we have a litmus test that we're asking them about socialism rather than the other way round. The normal mechanism for discussing the dynamics in the Labour Party is for a large number of right-wing politicians, or better said journalists and pundits, to interview the political representatives and judge them according to their own norms and values. And therefore to attack, that's why they're all so happy about Keir Starmer and Lisa Nandy and who's the other one? Jess Phillips. That's why they're all so happy about them, because they know that the type of terrain that they will debate is a totally different terrain than the majority of Labour members, and they're the people voting, will have. And therefore I will be trying to get interviews with all of the candidates for the Labour leadership, long, detailed, serious interviews about the fundamental direction that they wish to see society move in. Now, someone said to me earlier on, they said to me, oh, Labour was smashed in the election and so on. It's not quite true, actually. Labour was defeated heavily in the parliamentary procedure. We know what the voting percentages was, but perhaps the most interesting factor, and I refer you to a very simple quote from Vladimir Lenin. And it was a very simple quote: "He who has the youth has the future." Now, one thing was absolutely certain from the results in the election that took place in December was that the Labour Party had the largest percentage of the voters in the under 44 group.
They always have.
So, not all.
They've lost 5 elections in a row.
Sorry?
They've lost 5 elections in a row, haven't they? They've always had the youth. Youth
They
changed,
haven't
they get
lost
older.
five. Well, I don't know what
They get
elections you're
older and
referring
they change
to.
their views.
Well, so you say. However, I think that's a slight misunderstanding of the dynamics that we have seen. There was, for example, the argument has been given since the election that the reason Labour lost is because they lost the working class in the so-called red belt seats. And when they went round to these communities and they carried out television interviews with people there, they sound working class because they've got northern accents. They're certainly located in areas that used to be working class, like Barnsley, a former mining community, where of course the Beast of Bolsover was always elected for 49 years. And so it sounded logical from the Koonsberg angle, I'll take you 1 second, from the media pundits angle, it sounded logical to argue that Labour has lost the working class. This was the argument. And instead of this, Labour is now apparently based upon the liberal metropolitan elite and their children, the under 44-year-olds in the big cities and in the south of England. That is not factually correct for the following reasons. 1, in most of the towns in northern England where Labour lost and which were traditionally Labour, there has been a systematic deindustrialisation and unemployment and pensioning off of the populations there. I made the comparison to my mother because my mother's German. I said, these areas are like East Germany. And in fact, they lost their industrial base even before East Germany lost its industrial base. The defeat of the Miners' Union in 1985 signalled the decimation of manufacturing industry in those areas. And the older workers who were organised in mine workers' union and in traditional factories, they have been sifted out of the work process. Their children have generally moved away from those areas. The age structure in those areas is much older working class or traditional working class than those who moved to the cities like London, Manchester and Liverpool, where the people voted overwhelmingly Labour, whether in the north or in the south. Second point, the deindustrialisation of the northern parts of England has been met with a corresponding expansion of the working class in the metropolitan areas like London, Liverpool and Manchester. Those people who were previously considered impossible to reach for the Labour Party, doctors, nurses, intellectuals, academics, graduates, all these layers have now become working class. They are the ones who voted Labour in this election in large numbers, whereas previously they would have tended to vote, some still voted for the Liberals, but previously would have voted for Liberals or been quite happy with the right wing of the Labour Party or a soft Conservative government. Now, what is the psychology behind older, former working class communities in the north of England voting Conservative? What is the psychology behind it and supporting Brexit? Well, the interesting statistics were that the I think 69% of the over 65s in Britain voted Conservative. 69%, I think the figure was, from Lord Ashcroft's study. Under 45, the largest percentage went to Labour. Had or only under 45s voted, we would have won. Now, you made the point quite correctly, at least as far as common sense is concerned, that as you get older, you get more conservative. But ask yourself this, because I'm in the category, 56 years of age. I remember in my childhood the years of the 1960s, the years of the 1970s. I remember when we joined the European Union. I remember the period before the European Union. And those generations who voted Conservative in Britain, the unexpected shift within the northern communities, those are people who remember, like I do, the era before the European Union. And when we had a more protectionist, a more isolationist, a more interventionist state, a larger welfare state, provision that came after the Second World War, Britain was still an empire when they were children. Now, there was less immigration. There was no European Union membership. We even had the pre-decimalisation. I remember sixpences and pennies and calculating in 12 inches instead of centimetres. That generation within the working class in the northern areas of Britain shifted behind the Conservatives and voted in favour of Brexit earlier on, precisely because their consciousness was formed in another era. But of course, that generation is the noise, the echo, the ghost, the voice of the past affecting the present. It has no future within British society. It's a declining, no matter what Boris Johnson does. He will not be able to fundamentally alter the balance of wealth and power in those areas where Labour lost its so-called red. On the other side, the youth, now who, once upon a, when I was a kid, when I went to university, I got a grant to study at university. They gave you money to study. Education was free. But now we have nearly 50% of the population going to university. The overwhelming majority of the working class and the future working class of Britain. And I don't think, contrary to the delusions and stupidities that the mass media want to present you, they want to make out only a man with a cloth cap is working class. Only a man who has ferrets in his garden and flies pigeons, racing pigeons, is a working class man. No! The working class is constantly being transformed. Marx was very specific about this. He pointed out right back in 1848 in the Communist Manifesto, he said the scientist, the engineer, the physician, or hallowed professions, in crisis, they are driven into the working class. This is the general process happening, not only in Britain, but worldwide. Now, it is perfectly true that consciousness, as I pointed out earlier on, consciousness, political understanding, is always shaped by the ghosts of the past. The ghosts of the past. Man is a conservative animal. They seek to maintain their position despite the changes that occur around them. The Brexit vote and the vote for the Conservatives at the last election was an attempt to hang on to this delusion of some sort of isolationist, powerful, energetic, imperial past of Britain. But this is the language, the ideology, the delusion, which has no fundamental anchor in reality. And therefore, although Boris Johnson won resoundingly in the election, as I thought he would do, because that issue had hung in the air and people felt, in order to express their opposition to the dynamics of political an economic structure of power which is alien from them. 10 years, don't forget, more than 10 years. 12 years of economic, or since the economic recession, 2007, 2008, in which the economy has barely grown. Productivity has barely grown. Capitalism has been in a long-term stagnation or anemic growth, not only in Britain, but worldwide since 2008. Capitalism has been in crisis, but in crisis, as in the 1920s, as in the 1930s, the initial attitude, I remember, I remember standing over there, I think you were at the meeting, 2008, when the economy collapsed, people were screaming and shouting, fists in the air, these bankers, these rich people, stealing our money, blah, blah, blah. Bastards and so on, they said. But then came the expenses scandal. People associated political corruption with the economic corruption, correctly. And of course, it was the Blairites. Those people who now say Jeremy Corbyn destroyed the Labour Party, they were the people who were involved in it. And I remember Jeremy Corbyn, they looked at his expenses. In 1 year, he made one claim for one single ink toner, £8.95. And many of the other people have been claiming hundreds of thousands of pounds in expenses. That created a symbiosis in the minds of the people between corrupt capital and corrupt business. This whole idea, the Westminster bubble, the Westminster elite, removed from the people, and Brexit vote gave people a chance. Discontented workers and discontented pensioners, because that's a decisive question here, the pensioners. They voted for Brexit in order to stuff you, right? We'll show you. And of course, Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings have been riding on that anger at the establishment. Now, of course, the fact that Boris Johnson himself is the establishment of the establishment is an irrelevance as far as they're concerned. Because everybody, everybody's corrupt, everybody's up to it, everybody's doing something. And if you're Jeremy Corbyn, well, the problem is you're indecisive. You can't make your mind up. This is not true. Jeremy Corbyn is decisive. He was determined. The problem was he was surrounded by the ghosts of the past. Who are the ghosts of the past? They're the Blairite MPs who voted for war again and again and again. And in 2016, just after the Brexit vote happened, these people, they made out the Brexit issue was such a massive issue. But days after the Brexit vote, they called and they demanded Jeremy Corbyn must go. Jeremy Corbyn's to blame. And they called a second leadership election in 2 years, in 2016. And they tried to sabotage week in, week out, day in, day out, hour in, hour out, minute in, minute out, sabotage Corbyn. That was the aim. And it wasn't because Jeremy Corbyn was incompetent. It was because he's surrounded by enemies. And what he should have done, his big mistake, Jeremy's big mistake, was not to draw out a sword and kick these people out of the Labour Party. That's what he should have done in 2016. That's what he should have done in 2017. And that's what we need to do now inside the Labour Party. I'll tell you the difference. Well, you have your opinion. You're welcome to give it. So am I. What, you did what?
I was a member of the Labour
Okay.
Party. I don't want to argue with people who supported populism, continue to support populism. The fact of the matter is that the majority of the population, as you've identified, and I think your analysis is good, but the majority of the population, as the last election showed, are progressive. But the progressive side, however you call them, liberal, new Labour, companies, splintered, and the only way we can defeat the right, the far right, and what Boris Johnson and his government are going to do is keep them together.
No, I completely disagree, but that's I understand your point of view. I totally and absolutely disagree with it. No, I'm giving my point of view, and my point of view totally and my point of view totally. Well, you've got your point. That argument's been made very widely. I think the argument I'm making has very rarely been given airtime. Very rarely been given airtime.
You've been in the Labour Party for the past few years. Your argument has had.
I said airtime. Airtime. Of course. So let me tell you what. Just reply to what the gentleman here was asking. I'll just try and answer what you. And then if I haven't answered, you come back. And if I, you know, I don't want to fight with you. I'm giving you it's a debate on issues. That's what Speaker's Corner is. Well, I disagree with you. I disagree.
The only reason Blair got him was because of Rupert Murdoch.
Well, that's perfectly true.
It's the press.
That's perfectly true. But the problem is, anyone who panders to the press will lose, or they have to become what the press wants. So, Corbyn, at least, tried not to do that.
He was a man of principle.
Exactly. Now, in answer to your question, could we have won? I believe had Corbyn called for the members to purge the right wing from the Labour Party back in 2016 or 2017, and he was hindered from doing it. I'm giving you my point of view. Let me say that first of all before you question it and contradict it. Had he done so, just the same. You see, Theresa May was scared of doing that in the Conservative Party, right? She was scared, and that's why she was down in the polls and Labour was ahead in May last year. Or when
At that time, people wanted a man of principle.
one sec.
Now they don't.
One sec. Had Jeremy Corbyn moved decisively against the right wing of the party, all the media would have screamed. The right wing would have left. But what happened to them? To the so-called moderates. Every one of these moderates who was sabotaging and attacking Jeremy Corbyn, and I don't mind if you disagree about his ideas, but in terms of tactics and strategy, where Cummings was right was, he said to Johnson, launch an attack, demand loyalty, expel those who don't agree. And that got resonance in the eyes of the population. Here's a man who's determined and who'll stick by his guns no matter what. That, whether you like it or not, gains respect in Britain. And had Labour done the same, stood firm to their principles, expelled the right wing as MPs, mobilised the movement, advocated dramatic change, not 3 weeks before the election, but 2 years before the election, mobilised the people up and down the country to fight for their rights and change society and change the party. I believe we could either have won or stop the Tories from getting a majority. And if you look at what happened to those MPs on the so-called left of the Conservative Party, those MPs who left the Labour Party and joined Change UK, and then joined the Liberal Party, what happened to them? Catastrophic defeat. Not one of them, not one second, not one person, not one second. Luciana Berger is a right-wing reactionary within the party and should be, in my opinion, she should be booted out as the candidate in the first place. She had tried to sabotage Corbyn all along.
Have one voice and then they would have won.
I didn't say one voice. I said those people who attempted to sabotage and undermine. If you check their parliamentary voting records, you will check they voted for PFI. They voted for privatisation. They voted against the trade unions. They voted for so-called law and order agenda like Keir Starmer. He was head of the CPS.
So he didn't
They voted for the war in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and now of course, and then over Syria, and now of course they will start thinking, oh, we can vote for a war against Iran.
So he
Sorry,
failed.
you drove, and people like you in the Labour Party drove people like me out of the
I'm
Labour
sorry,
Party. No,
but then you
hold
probably
on a
shouldn't
moment,
be
sir.
in the Labour Party.
Hold on a moment, sir. What I'm saying is, when it comes to an election, then we
If
are
your
told
heart
that
is with the
people
Liberals,
left
go with the
of-
Liberals. I don't
When
care.
it comes to an election, you need people who are left of centre to vote.
Well, I
for
don't
the
believe the
Labour
Liberals
Party.
are left of centre.
I'm telling you.
Nor
but-
do I believe,
but sir,
nor
you-
do I
but sir,
believe that the
Labour
right wing and the
Party
Labour
then
Party are left
begging
of centre.
people- the
I
Labour
don't
Party
believe
then
launching.
trying to persuade people like me to vote for the
My
Labour
friend,
Party.
you
And
are
the
saying
point-
that
the
you've
point
already
is
left.
You're splitting the vote. You
I don't
cannot-
agree with you.
You cannot.
I don't
get
agree with you.
Labour or left government
You see,
until-
you
unless
see,
we
what's
unite
your,
the
well,
vote.
that's your opinion. We've heard that opinion everywhere in the mass media. Did it achieve anything? Zero. Nothing. From nothing, with nothing, to nothing, as George Frederick Hegel once said. What did they get? Change UK. Zero. How many MPs? Zero. The Tories who left the Tory party? Zero. The Labour who left the Labour party? Zero. Why?
You will know, sir,
Why
that is
did they
about
not
our
win a
electoral
single
system.
seat?
You will know that that is about
If
our
this was the
electoral system.
No, it's not.
And
No, it's not.
first
These were
and
sitting
the dominance
MPs.
of a
Many of them,
two-party system,
many
and
of
the
them were
desperation
sitting
of people
MPs.
that they felt
Sitting.
could only vote
What about
for
the sitting
Labour or
MPs?
Conservative.
What about the sitting MPs?
It is about the two-party
Why did they all
system.
lose?
It is about the two-party
Well, I don't
system.
care about that. I'm not a
We need-
liberal. You are a
We
liberal
all
politically.
we all need electoral reform.
My
if
friend,
we are to want-
my
if
friend,
we are to have
the problem
people
is
to serve in
this.
Parliament.
The Labour Party has been torn. As
Yes, they did.
let
and
me
that was
let
after
me
a
let me
government
let me
of
explain. Let me
unity.
explain. You
That was
have a
after
view.
government of
One
unity.
second. One second. You said you didn't want to argue. I think it's fair to argue, but arguing means you give your point of view, I respond to you, you can respond to me, and you hear me out, and I hear you out. Right? I think that's fair enough. If I've mistaken anything you say and I misrepresent anything you say, you take me up then on that. So let me first present what you're arguing and tell me if I'm wrong. You're arguing that to stop this right-wing conservatism, you need a progressive alliance of Liberals, Greens and other MPs who don't associate with a sort of hard Brexit conservative policy, and that this would, perhaps through electoral reform, create a majority who would oppose this type of policy. Is that a correct representation, roughly, of your point of view?
Yes.
Right. So, why do I think that's incorrect? The Labour Party, in my view, has to represent the mass of working people, and by working people I extended that, I explained. This is not a cloth cap worker with ferrets. It's people who live by selling their labour power for a wage. The overwhelming majority of the British population, of the adult population. Now, I believe that we are facing, and that Labour represents, this trend towards the struggle for socialism. Socialism means the abolition of capitalism. Capitalism is a system in which the decisive levers of economic power, the banks and the biggest corporations, are owned by private interests and serve private interests. Now, I believe that only by the abolition of capitalism, that means taking the banks and big industries into public ownership and planning what is done with the economic resources in society, can you establish a society that can meet the needs of the people. And the whole history of the 20th century in Britain attests to the fact that Labour, if it capitulates to capitalism, it merely acts as the second management team of capitalism in Parliament. It does not actually affect the system of capitalism. And therefore, what happened under Corbyn with his election was the re-emergence of socialism as the subject matter of debate. And we got 500,000 people to join the Labour Party, more than any other socialist party in Europe. That is the foundation upon which we can construct a socialist movement, campaigning for the ideas, rights and aspirations of the masses, and yes, for the end of capitalism. Now, I understand that you will not affiliate with that, and I don't want you to affiliate that if it's not your view.
I think, however, that the fact that we got 32% when people thought this is what we're advocating, even though we weren't advocating that, is illustrative of the fact it's only 8 people in 100 to win. We only have to win 8 more people out of 100 and we'll have a majority. So it is not true to say socialism is unpopular. It has not been advocated within the Labour Party because unfortunately the Labour Party in Parliament remains dominated by this liberal elite who think that there's some sort of nicer type of capitalism hidden somewhere in a box that they can pull out of a hat, and one day suddenly there'll be a nice capitalism there for you. There will not. Capitalism is a system governed by the pursuit of profit. Profit rates are low. We've got 10 years of economic stagnation in Britain and Europe and the world. Barely 1 or 2% growth. Barely any increase in profitability. Barely any increase in investment. Most of the investment borrowed by private companies today from the banks at low interest has gone into buying up other companies. Today in the world, the average person on earth, man, woman and child, now owes £32,500 in global debt. So we're entering a period in which there will be a new economic crisis, deeper perhaps than 2008, 2009. And so we must prepare for the economic contraction, crisis and explosions of discontent that we will see. Don't forget Macron managed to stand as a new party, reinvent himself like Tony Blair. And what happened? 60% of the vote, massive, new, progressive consensus. And what happened then? Then he says, well, we must increase the petrol price because we're very green. What happened? Every single week, hundreds of thousands of French people, up to the nose with this shit, took to the streets and protested in the Yellow Vest movement. Now we've had the longest general strike in France. In the last 5 weeks, the longest general strike in France since the 1960s. So do not believe the class struggle, class conflict, social unrest has gone. What we need to do is not a progressive movement of nice liberals. What we need is a revolutionary movement of the working class and the youth to transform society from top to bottom, beginning inside the Labour Party. I am campaigning now, perhaps hopelessly, but now I'm campaigning for this. To get Jeremy Corbyn to stand in the new leadership election himself. I hope he does it. I doubt it because he's tired of it, he's sick of it, but I hope he does it. And if he doesn't, we will campaign in every constituency, up and down the country, to mobilise for a real programme of social change. And how do we get a base in society? We campaign on housing rights. Housing rights for the people. We campaign on legal issues. Just like Extinction Rebellion brought the city to its knees by sitting on the streets and calculating. How many police officers are there in London? How many cells do they have in London? Okay, then we need 1,000 people to get arrested and they can't function. So I suggest the following. We don't blockade the streets, but in every workplace, the workers demand their rights according to the law. In every housing estate, workers demand their rights according to the law. No more Grenfell Towers. No more student hostels burnt down because of the willingness of capital to abandon all planning laws, all regulation, all fire rules, and then get away with it scot-free. Having murdered those people in Grenfell Tower, they blame the fire brigade, right? That's the insanity. So we need to clog up the courts, clog up the councils, clog up the administration, and mobilise, defend the rights of the people. Know the law, study the law, use the law, and clog the courts up, break the system. That's the way to operate. Mobilise, organise, agitate, educate. Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen. I know you disagree.
I know, right?
No worries.
Can we speak privately? Can we speak one-on-one? I would like
Well,
to...
I mean, it's not one-on-one, it's a camera run.
Oh.
There's a camera run, it goes on YouTube, but if you're happy to do that, fine.
No,
Come right here.
I actually wanted to engage with you. I'm not filming anything for YouTube.
Well, but I am doing, it is being done already.
Oh, okay. I thought you wanted to have a serious conversation about actually getting rid of a hard-right conservative government.
Well, they're in power. How are you going to get rid of them? Like, the way you get rid of them is what I've just said.
The way that we get
I've just
rid
said
of them is
mobilise.
not gonna-
Mobilise the masses to defend their rights.
You can't
Out with
build an
democracy.
electoral. You can't build electoral.
That is defence of democracy.
You can't build an electoral win
No, we
on
lost the
your
election.
the
We've
next
lost the
election.
election.
The next election after that. You've
How do we
talked
win?
about-
How do we win the
you've
people?
You're not letting me speak. You just lectured me on like letting you speak and then
I'm giving
respond.
my point of view.
Yes, but you're not letting me respond. Okay? So the problem is you talk about purging people like me, as was
Well, you left
successfully
already.
done out of the Labour Party, and purging
You
anyone.
left yourself, right?
I was
You were
purged. I was attacked
purged.
in my constituency Labour Party by, to be frank, people like you, consistently
Meaning
at
what?
my CLP,
Meaning what?
on social media, attacked again and again.
Well, that's
and again, as
politics,
was my
isn't
MP.
it?
This is fine.
That's
This
politics.
is fine. No, it's
We
not.
get
That's
attacked.
You mean they
no, it's-
disagreed with you?
Excuse me. But the point is, you use the word purging. You talked
Yes.
about getting rid
Yes,
of
yes.
people like me and
I
others.
didn't say
that-
you.
Okay.
You said that.
You said
I said the
people who
MPs.
consider
I
themselves
didn't
nice
say, I said the
progressives.
MPs.
Said the right
I said the
wing of
right
Labour
wing
Party.
in the Labour Party.
Okay.
Those who
The
attack
point
Corbyn,
is- the point-
why are they not game to be attacked as well? I don't understand it.
The point is, and you talked about the size of the Labour Party membership, and that's fine. And and for people who advocate for socialism, it is a point of view. I don't, I can find common ground, but it is not something that I believe in as the solution to the country. But we need all people, not just 500,000 people or however many members there are of the Labour
Can I
Party.
ask you a question?
And to appeal to that wider electorate, which will include people like me, people who consider themselves nice, progressive, whatever. You need them
On the
to
basis
vote.
of what?
You
What-
need them
on the basis
to
of what?
vote.
On the basis of
And
what?
this-
On the
and
basis
this kind
of what?
rhetoric
On the basis of
scares
what?
people.
On the basis
Hard-
of what policies?
Extremism on the left
What policies?
does not scares people more than
You're
extremism
just
on the
you're
right.
using vague terms. What are the policies that you're advocating that would then be an alternative to what we're proposing? What are the policies?
I'm talking about your rhetoric and
Well,
what you've
so
just
it's
said.
meaningless. What are the policies? Let me point this out to you. In Europe, the social democratic parties who are doing what you're saying in every country, pretty much every country, in all of them, they've had catastrophic collapse in votes.
Yes.
Is that a Labour? Is that Jeremy Corbyn's fault? In
as
Germany,
as
in
as I
France,
said
in Italy,
earlier,
in Greece,
the
in Spain.
frustration is that there
Everywhere.
is one single party to vote for currently on the right in this country, and many parties to vote for on the left. If you look at
I
the
don't-
population
I don't see what
overall,
they are, but
if
anyway.
you look at the population overall and the voting figures from the last election, we had more people voting for parties on the left than
Well,
party on
I
the
don't
right,
call
and
them
yet
parties
they
on the
won.
left. You
Okay.
call them that. I
Whatever
don't
you're
call them
going
that.
to call them, the point is that the vote is split. And therefore, particularly in a first-past-the-post system, we get an 80-seat conservative landslide.
Well, let me tell you- let me tell
so
you-
the
let me-
only
let me
way
te-
that
let
we
me
have
tell
a
you.
chance
Let's
is
imagine.
through electoral reform, and we can only get electoral reform if we get the
get-
parties, progressive
let's
parties, to
imagine.
actually have
Let's
a
ima-
majority
let's imagine
in
your
government
policy.
because a majority in
See,
parliament
imagine
because
discussing
get a
because
coalition
the Conservatives are never going to vote for
what-
electoral
the-
reform.
the-
So even if it's for the
The idea.
Progressives
She's
need
not
to work
advocating a policy.
together
Electoral
to
well,
get
that's
rid of
the only
Conservative
the only
vote for
reason
electoral
she wants
reform,
electoral.
and then have a House of Parliament
The
that
only
reflects
reason she's
different
advocating
points of
election
view.
reform is to try and prevent the right from being in power. It's not a policy. It's a tactical policy for votes, for the structure of balance of power in Parliament. That's not actually economic or social policy. However, what she say? Sorry.
I think generally
Just
the
one
parties
second.
should be
Just one second.
rewarded
Do
for
you mind if I
working
reply? One
together,
second. Just
working
one second.
together,
One second.
and
The
finding
truth of the matter
solutions,
is,
whether they're socialist
the truth of the
solutions
matter
or
is,
whatever, that
it was
will
quite
actually
clear in the
work.
election. Right, you don't actually. It was quite clear in the election that had Jo Swinson gained the position where she held the balance of power, she would have made a deal with the Conservatives.
That's absolutely
With the
untrue.
as the
Oh,
Liberals,
yes.
as the
Absolutely
Liberals
untrue.
did in the last time,
She said so.
as the Liberals did that,
That's
she
untrue.
said she
said
could
she
never
would
make a
do-
deal
she
with
would never do a deal with
Conservative,
She
with,
said
with,
so.
with Labour.
She said that she would not go into
With
coalition
Corbyn,
with
exactly.
either Boris.
So in other words,
she
she
said she
was
would not go
demanding
into
a change.
coalition with either
Change
Boris
the
Johnson's
look,
Conservative government
So in
or
other words,
Jeremy Corbyn's
and look
Labour
what happened to her.
government.
She couldn't even win her own seat.
I'm not
Couldn't
defending
even
Joe
win her own
Swinson. I
seat.
don't think we should have
Joe
had an
Swinson.
election
Where's the
in
progressive?
December. I don't think we should have
Too
had an
bad.
election in
Too
December.
bad
I
it's
think we
happened.
should have.
babes.
It's happened.
Joe
I'm
Swinson.
responding-
We are where we're at.
but
The
you're-
point is, you haven't
you're
advocated.
attacking
You
that the
haven't
Liberals
advocated
performed in
a
the
single
election.
progressive policy. You call for a progressive alliance, but where's the progressive in the
And
progressive
where's
alliance?
where's
The
the-
Liberals are not a progressive party. The Liberals are a reactionary party.
Tories.
In fact, they were around at before the Conservative Party around. They were the landowning class in Britain. That's where the Liberal Party comes from. The Liberal Party existed long before the right to vote
The Liberal
existed.
Democrats.
If Joe
Right?
Swinson-
So what are you
Babes,
talking about?
babes,
Well,
listen,
it's the
listen,
same
listen,
origin of the
listen.
party.
SDP
That's
went
where the
one
party
seat,
comes
and the
from.
last
It
time
was a
the Labour Party
landowning,
took over, the
a
Labour Party
landowning,
drove,
a
Social
landowning
Democrats out of
aristocratic
it.
party.
So the Labour Party,
Don't
if
you
it can't-
remember when
if
Nick
it can't
Clegg,
have Social
listen.
Nick
Democrats
Clegg,
as well,
Nick
Social
Clegg and the
Democrats,
Liberals
it is
coalesced
not the broad
with
church
the Tories?
I don't know where the progressive in your argument is.
Yeah.
I fail
Listen,
to see it.
Joe Swinson, if she'd
I
agreed
think
to,
what you
I
mean-
am
I think
saying
what
is
you
that
mean
by-
with the
by
unspoken
doing
is-
this,
the unspoken
we are never
is-
going to get
What are you
Conservatives
doing
out
this?
of government.
Well, I disagree with you. That's what they always say.
if Joe Swinson had
Always
agreed
say.
to, if Joe Swinson had agreed to Jeremy Corbyn being a caretaker, yeah, a caretaker.
Well, that's right, then the
if she'd
Conservative
agreed
would have been out,
She
that's
would
true.
have got.
That's
She would have
true.
got a second,
That's
second referendum. She would have got a second referendum. Instead, she got Brexit by first past the
That's true.
post.
That's
She's a PR person who got Brexit by first past the post and lost her seat for
And
it.
whose real aim
Would
was
you
to
like
sabotage the
talk
Labour
about
Party.
that? Because if you want to talk about the
She
mistakes
did that.
of-
That's what she did.
I can talk
These
about
are
that.
She did that.
I'm really happy to talk
Nevertheless,
about that.
Carry on.
carry on. But these are
Answer that.
machinations. I mean, I won't intervene more. I'll leave you two to argue that. But these are machinations at the parliamentary level. I agree with what you said.
Well, it's
but
what
they
happened.
are machinations. That's exactly. They are machinations at the parliamentary level. They aren't about what is progressive or not. And you've still not defined anything progressive apart from, like you say, electoral reform. Don't think it's progressive either.
I didn't say
think
progressive.
No, but I don't think that's progressive either. All I think that does is produce the same result as in Europe, and in Europe, well, am I trying to hide it?
I'm
I'm not. I've been advocating that. I've been advocating that since 1986 at Speaker's Corner. So
Well, how are you
you
going to
say.
get? How are you going to
So
get
you say,
proportional
but we'll see.
representation? How are you going to get proportional representation? How?
Anyway, I'll call a break for now. Piers is coming up in a little while, Jeremy Corbyn's brother, so he'll have his point of view as well.
The Liberals allied themselves with the Tories.
How are you going to get proportional representation?
Sorry,
How do you think you're going to get proportional representation with Labour and Conservative both against it?
I think. Sorry, I don't want to really stand in front of this microphone. I just, I'm not on a
Streaming
soapbox.
with the
I'm just
World Wide
actually
Web.
talking.
It's a virtual soapbox everywhere.
No, I mean, I think there were terrible mistakes made. And
Yeah, where are you now? Yeah, where are you now? Hello? Piers. Hear me now? Where? London Bridge.
So what change do you want? What government?
All right.
Is it more nice?
I know.
rolling the eyes at that too.
ContentCOE everything. From your Benjamin.
Come, man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV. Listen.
I agree with what you're saying.
Man, don't listen to ITV.
I don't even listen to Sky YG. I just listen to COE. I don't listen to BBC. I don't listen to ITV. I don't even listen to Sky. I agree. Man don't even listen to COE. Man just listen to COE. Man just listen to COE. You see me in COE. Talking over everything. COE. Man not in the no BBC. Man not in the no ITV.
Right, let's have you then. Let's have you.
They just listen to COE. Sorry, Bobby, I'm lying.
I mean, I don't mind asking questions. That's it. Oh no, he's great. He's great. But he's great spontaneous. No, I was on the show.